Emma Carter thought she was meeting the perfect man. Ryan Keller knew he was meeting his next victim. Their first date began with laughter in a cozy cafe and ended in a nightmare that gripped the entire town. Within days, Emma's dismembered remains were found scattered across Brookdale, each discovery painting a picture of unspeakable cruelty. Ryan vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of blood, lies, and unanswered questions. What started as an innocent connection turned into one of the most chilling murder cases the city had ever seen, proving that sometimes the person you trust most is the one you should fear. Emma Carter's Friday evening began like any other, except this time she was determined to do something new. After weeks of hesitation, she finally agreed to go on a date with a man she'd met online. At 27, she was hopeful but cautious, a woman who believed in giving people a chance, though she'd learned to keep her guard up. Ryan Keller's profile had seemed ordinary enough. He was 34, worked as a mechanic, and described himself as someone who valued honesty and loyalty. His photos showed him smiling with a dog, working on cars, and standing in front of a lake at sunset. There was nothing in those pictures that hinted at danger. They decided to meet at the Blue Finch Cafe, a cozy spot near downtown Brookdale, known for its soft music and warm lights. Emma told her roommate Lily she'd be home by midnight, then spent an hour picking out her outfit, a floral blouse and faded jeans, casual but nice. She left her apartment around 7, promising to text once she got there. The evening air was cool and calm, and the streets shimmered under rows of amber lamps. She felt a flutter of nervous excitement, unaware it would be the last time she'd ever feel that way. Inside the cafe, she spotted Ryan immediately. He looked exactly like his photos, maybe even better in person. Tall, clean-shaven, confident. He greeted her with an easy smile that made her relax. Witnesses would later say they looked happy together, laughing and talking as if they had known each other for years. The two ordered coffee and pastries, chatting about work, travel, and family. Ryan spoke with enthusiasm, but often steered the conversation back to her, asking about her past relationships, where she lived, who she lived with. At the time, it seemed like friendly curiosity. By 9:30, the cafe began to empty. Ryan offered to walk her to her car, but Emma mentioned she had taken a rideshare. He suggested dropping her home instead, claiming his truck was parked nearby. The security footage showed the two leaving together, walking side by side toward the lot behind the cafe. Emma seemed at ease, her posture open, her steps light. It would be the last recording of her alive. When Emma didn't return home, Lily assumed the night had gone well. She tried calling, but Emma's phone rang unanswered. It wasn't unusual for her to stay out late, so Lily went to bed thinking nothing of it. By morning, the unease began. Emma's phone was off. Her social media showed no updates. No one from work had heard from her. By evening, panic set in, and Lily went to the police station to report her missing. Detectives started with what they had: phone records, social media messages, and the cafe's security footage. Ryan Keller was identified quickly. His dating app profile linked to his verified phone number and home address. Officers visited his property that night, but he wasn't home. His neighbors said they hadn't seen him since Saturday morning. Emma's family arrived from another city the next day, overwhelmed by fear and disbelief. The search effort grew rapidly. Flyers with Emma's photo, smiling, brown-haired, alive, covered store windows and streetlights. Volunteers combed through parks and riversides. Police questioned everyone who had been at the cafe that night, but no one had seen anything unusual. For 2 days, Brookdale buzzed with whispers and speculation. Was it a kidnapping? Did she leave voluntarily? Every hour that passed made hope fade a little more. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A jogger found a black plastic bag along a suburban road on the city's edge. Inside was something so horrifying it silenced the town. The first clue had been found, but Emma was still missing, and Ryan Keller had disappeared without a trace. The discovery of the black plastic bag marked the beginning of Brookdale's most disturbing crime scene. The jogger who found it was too shaken to speak at first, only managing to describe the stench and the weight of what he had seen before running for help. When police opened the bag, the reality was worse than anyone imagined. Inside lay a woman's arm, carefully wrapped in plastic and bound with duct tape. It wasn't random or hurried, it was deliberate, almost calculated. Within hours, detectives confirmed through fingerprints that it belonged to Emma Carter. The missing persons case was now a murder investigation. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Brookdale, once known for its quiet neighborhoods and friendly faces, was now crawling with police cars, reporters, and forensic vans. Everyone wanted answers. The police formed a task force, bringing in detectives from nearby counties. They knew the killer had gone to great lengths to scatter the evidence, which meant this was someone who wanted to delay discovery, or someone who took satisfaction in watching the town unravel. The following morning, another trash bag was found behind a gas station on the outskirts of town. Inside were fragments of clothing, blood-soaked fabric, and something that looked like a piece of bone. The pattern was becoming clear. Whoever had done this wanted to make Emma's body impossible to recover fully, to erase her as completely as possible. The police began expanding their search radius, scouring wooded areas, riverbanks, and alleyways. Every hour brought another grim discovery. Behind a supermarket, they found a foot. Near a creek, a hand. By evening, they had recovered enough remains to confirm Emma's death beyond doubt. The public was horrified. Parents refused to let their children out after dark. Women who used dating apps deleted their profiles overnight. Fear settled over the city like a fog, and the cafe where Emma had last been seen became a shrine covered with flowers, candles, and photos. Her family stood silently during the vigil, surrounded by hundreds of strangers holding candles in trembling hands. Reporters swarmed them for interviews, but no one could find the right words. Inside the investigation room, detectives pored over every lead connected to Ryan Keller. His name had surfaced within hours of Emma's disappearance, but now he was at the center of everything. His house was searched from top to bottom. The results were chilling. Traces of blood were found on the floor of his garage, along with industrial cleaning chemicals and gloves. In the sink, forensic teams discovered fibers matching the same type of plastic used to wrap the body parts. There were also small scratches on the workbench consistent with cutting tools. But Ryan was gone. Detectives tracked his last known movements using surveillance footage and bank activity. The night after Emma vanished, Ryan's credit card had been used at a gas station 50 miles away. Cameras showed him alone buying fuel and 2 bottles of water. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. He looked calm, almost detached, as if nothing unusual had happened. That was the last time he was seen. Days passed with no sign of him. Search teams combed through abandoned buildings and nearby forests, but every lead turned cold. Then a break came when police received a tip from a store clerk who recognized Ryan from the news. The clerk claimed Ryan had come into his store days earlier, asking for directions to the highway leading north. He looked tired, unshaven, and nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. By the end of that week, Brookdale was on edge. News anchors described the case as one of the most disturbing in state history. People locked their doors early, scanning faces in crowds, afraid the killer might be someone they knew. For Emma's family, grief turned into desperation. They wanted Ryan found dead or alive, and as the police closed in on new evidence from his home, it became clear that the horrors of what he had done were only beginning to surface. When police returned to Ryan Keller's home for a deeper search, the air inside the small single-story house felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of what had happened there. The faint smell of bleach lingered in every corner, and though the floors looked spotless, detectives knew the shine was hiding something dark beneath it. In the garage, they uncovered a table with scratches deep enough to suggest a struggle, and nearby, a handsaw with traces of blood so microscopic that only lab tests could confirm what everyone already feared. The freezer in the corner was half empty, lined with thick plastic sheets and faint reddish stains streaked along its edges. It was enough evidence to prove that Emma's body had been dismembered there, but Ryan Keller was nowhere to be found. Every trace of him vanished after that gas station stop days earlier. His phone had been turned off, his bank accounts untouched, and his car had disappeared with him. Investigators believed he was on the run, possibly hiding in nearby woods or rural towns where he could blend in unnoticed. For days, helicopters circled over highways and forests, and roadblocks were set up in and out of Brookdale. Still, there was no sign of Ryan. It was as though he had disappeared into thin air. The town's fear deepened. Neighbors whispered about seeing him in different places, at a diner late at night near an abandoned lot or walking by the river. Most of the reports turned out false, but each one added to the tension. Meanwhile, investigators followed the evidence trail left inside Ryan's home. In his bedroom, they found an old laptop. Forensic analysts recovered deleted files that contained disturbing material, search histories on body disposal, dissolving tissue, and ways to avoid detection. The timestamps showed these searches had been made days before Emma's murder. That discovery changed everything. What had once seemed like an impulsive act now looked calculated. More evidence emerged when police found traces of Emma's jewelry and phone case buried in Ryan's backyard. They appeared to have been thrown there hastily, as if he panicked while trying to get rid of them. It suggested that something had gone wrong during his cleanup, that maybe he had run out of time or been interrupted. Detectives began to suspect Ryan might have had help, or at least someone, who knew more than they were admitting. The investigation took a turn when officers interviewed people who had known Ryan. His co-workers described him as distant and private, often spending lunch breaks alone in his car. A few mentioned that he could be charming when he wanted to be, but had sudden mood swings that made them uncomfortable. One recalled seeing a large bruise on his forearm the Monday after Emma disappeared. Others spoke about his obsession with control, especially when it came to relationships. The case file grew thicker each day, full of timelines, evidence logs, and witness statements. But there were still missing pieces. The biggest question remained: what had happened in the hours after Emma left the cafe with Ryan? Detectives theorized that he had taken her home under the pretense of showing her his dog, or continuing their conversation. Something inside that house must have triggered his rage. Whether it was rejection, jealousy, or pure psychopathy, no one could say. Then came a break in the search. 2 hikers reported finding an abandoned truck in a wooded area north of town. When police arrived, they found Ryan's vehicle hidden behind thick brush. Inside were several empty bottles of water, a stained blanket, and Emma's missing purse. The blood in the back seat matched hers. It was clear he had used the truck to transport her body, but Ryan himself was still missing. The discovery only deepened the mystery. Some believed he was still alive, hiding somewhere nearby, waiting for the chaos to fade. Others thought he might have turned on himself out of guilt or fear. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The man who had charmed his way into Emma Carter's trust was no longer just a suspect. He was a calculated killer, and the hunt to find him had become a race against time before someone else became his next victim. As investigators continued piecing together the puzzle, Ryan Keller's absence only deepened the mystery. Every lead that surfaced ended in another dead end. But the more police uncovered about his past, the more monstrous he became. Digging through old records, detectives discovered that Ryan had changed his name 5 years earlier. His original name appeared in police archives tied to a string of violent incidents in another state. He had once been charged with assaulting an ex-girlfriend, though the case had been dropped when the victim disappeared before testifying. Another record showed a restraining order filed by a woman named Lena Brooks. The pattern was unmistakable. Ryan Keller had a long hidden history of violence against women. Lena became a person of interest. Detectives found her living in a neighboring town under a different last name, clearly trying to escape her past. When investigators arrived, she appeared terrified just hearing Ryan's name. She explained that they had lived together years ago, and their relationship had turned abusive quickly. He was controlling, possessive, and paranoid. He'd followed her to work, checked her phone, and accused her of things that never happened. The final straw came when she caught him taking photos of her while she slept. She fled the next morning and never looked back. According to Lena, Ryan had tried contacting her recently. 2 weeks before Emma's murder, he appeared at her door, uninvited. He told her he was starting over, that he had met someone new and that she should forgive him. When she refused to let him inside, he grew angry and threatened that she'd regret ignoring him. Lena didn't report the incident at the time, but now she realized it might have been a sign of something brewing beneath the surface. Investigators used this new information to build a psychological profile. Ryan was not a spontaneous killer. He was organized and manipulative. He liked control and felt threatened when he lost it. Emma's independence, confidence, and warmth likely drew him in, but also triggered his insecurities. The more they studied his past, the clearer it became that Emma's murder had been premeditated, possibly planned days in advance. The search of his computer had already revealed web searches about disposing of bodies. Now detectives also found a list of locations on his phone, places where the body parts were later found. The realization was horrifying. He had mapped out exactly where he would scatter her remains before the crime even happened, but there was still no sign of Ryan himself. Weeks had passed and theories flooded social media. Some claimed he had fled the country, others believed he was dead, and a few thought he was hiding nearby watching the chaos unfold. Then another piece of the puzzle surfaced when a fisherman discovered a backpack floating near the edge of Brookdale River. Inside were Emma's missing earrings, a small notebook, and a wallet belonging to Ryan Keller. The backpack also contained a folded piece of paper covered in smeared handwriting. It looked like a page torn from a journal. The words were almost unreadable, but one line stood out. "She wouldn't stop crying, and I couldn't stop hearing it." The note changed the tone of the investigation completely. It suggested guilt, perhaps remorse, but also something more disturbing, a mind fractured by obsession and rage. Detectives began to believe Ryan had gone into hiding not to escape justice, but to avoid facing what he'd done. The search area shifted north toward the dense forests and abandoned cabins near the state border. Officers scoured the region for any sign of him. They found empty campsites, discarded food wrappers, and one chilling clue: a boot print that matched Ryan's size found beside a rotting log. It was proof he had been alive, moving through the wilderness. The people of Brookdale followed every update as if living through a nightmare that wouldn't end. Candlelight vigils turned into protests demanding justice, and true crime enthusiasts swarmed the town hoping for details. But behind the noise, detectives worked quietly, knowing the story wasn't finished. Somewhere out there, the man who had taken Emma Carter's life was still breathing. The only question left was how long he could hide before his own darkness caught up with him. The search for Ryan Keller stretched into its third week, and by then, the entire town of Brookdale was exhausted. The once peaceful city had turned into a place of fear and speculation. Every stranger's face drew suspicion, and every sound in the woods sparked panic. Police officers continued combing through fields, riversides, and abandoned properties, determined to bring an end to the nightmare. The forested area north of the city became the main focus. It was vast and difficult to search, but investigators believed Ryan was somewhere in those woods, living off stolen food and bottled water, evading capture. Then one Sunday morning, a hiker made a gruesome discovery. Deep within the trees, in a small clearing surrounded by moss and fallen branches, lay the decomposing body of a man. The smell hit the search team before they even reached him. His clothes were tattered, his face unrecognizable, but the wallet found in his pocket confirmed the truth. It was Ryan Keller. The manhunt was over. The scene was hauntingly quiet. Next to his body lay a handgun and a weathered notebook soaked from rain. The pages were smeared and torn, but enough words remained to tell part of his final story. The entries were dated in the days following Emma Carter's disappearance. The first few pages were filled with frantic, disjointed thoughts about hearing voices, seeing shadows, and not being able to sleep. He wrote about guilt, but not in a way that suggested regret. It was more like he was haunted by something he couldn't control. The final line before the ink bled into nothing read simply, "She wouldn't stop screaming, even when she was gone." The medical examiner determined that Ryan had taken his own life roughly a week before he was found. The cause was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The body showed no signs of struggle, no evidence of anyone else being present. The man who had terrorized Brookdale had ended his life alone, surrounded by silence and decay. The discovery brought an abrupt end to the case, but not to the suffering it left behind. Emma's family received the news with a strange mix of relief and sorrow. There would be no trial, no confession, and no explanation, only the remains of their daughter and the unanswered question of why. Investigators pieced together the final timeline based on the evidence found. After leaving the cafe that night, Ryan had driven Emma to his house. Something during that visit had turned violent. Whether she tried to leave or confronted him about his behavior, it triggered the rage that defined his past. In the hours that followed, Ryan killed her, dismembered her body, and carefully distributed the remains across different parts of town. Then, realizing the police were closing in, he fled to the woods and took his own life. For the people of Brookdale, the case became a cautionary tale about trust appearances and the hidden dangers behind smiling faces. True crime documentaries and online forums dissected every detail. They analyzed Ryan's behavior, Emma's final moments, and the systemic failures that allowed a man with a violent past to vanish and start anew under a different name. Yet no amount of analysis could bring clarity to the madness that had unfolded. Months later, the cafe where Emma had last been seen reopened under new management, but many locals couldn't bring themselves to step inside. The place carried a shadow that no fresh coat of paint could cover. Her story lived on through whispered warnings to others, especially young women meeting strangers for the first time. In the end, the tragedy of Emma Carter wasn't only in the brutality of her death, but in the ordinariness of how it began. A first date with someone who seemed kind, safe, and genuine. Brookdale eventually quieted, but every so often when the wind swept through the empty streets at night, people said it carried an echo of that dark story. A reminder that evil doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it smiles, holds open the door, and offers to walk you to your car.